The only reason I'm explaining these is because people come to me with these calculations, and they basically say, I think I'm gonna live beyond 16 and a half years. I have to take the monthly. It's like, well, that's not the right math. Welcome back to our YouTube channel, Zacc Call Money Education. This is the Guided Path series. It's a really organized list of everything you need to know to be good at money. And today we're talking about pension decisions. This comes after you've figured out your Social Security benefits and organized your retirement income decisions. So this is part of it. We're layering on the pension on top of Social Security. Excited to talk about this today. I'm Zacc Call. I'm the president of Capita Financial Network, and my personal mission is to deliver superior financial planning to as many households as possible. This YouTube channel is part of that mission.
And I'm Tony Inkley. I'm a media producer here at Capita Financial Network. And I'm new to this world. And so I'm learning all about these little details about financial planning. And so Zacc's going to be teaching me just as much as he's going to be teaching you. And so let's just jump in.
Perfect. Okay. First thing to understand is the basics. So understanding the basics of a pension, how they work, who's eligible for them. It's pretty rare. Back in the 80s, 60% of employers offered a pension.
And sorry, like the word pension, I've heard this word a million times, but just like for the really, really beginner people like me, what does that really mean?
I love that you do that. That's perfect. Help me make sure I cover it just right.
Because hopefully the viewers already know what that means, and I'm not like.
No, but there's some that are out there. And the word is confusing because people will use it in different meanings. But specifically, what we're talking about today is an offer from your employer that at a certain age they will pay you a monthly benefit for the rest of your life.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
And I felt like it was something like that. I wanted to define.
And it's important to understand these things they're calculated on usually a couple of things. How much you earned during your career and how long you worked for your employer. So here locally, the state of Utah has a pension, and it's one of the better ones we run into. So if you work what they do is they give you 2% of your income, your top 3 earning years, for every year you work. And so if you worked for 30 years as a teacher, they're going to give you 60% of the average of the 3 best income years you had. That's how they calculate your pension. Others have more of like what they call unit benefit formula, where they give you a certain dollar amount put towards the pension, convert it into what it would be for a monthly benefit based on how much you earn. That's a calculation that can be very specific to your employer, but the idea is they're going to take your service, and quantify it into a dollar amount and then give that back to you. And usually they will give you a little bit, like they'll say, this is the benefit if you take it at full retirement, whatever they choose that is. It might be 62. Last time we talked about Social Security, and it's 66 or 67 for most people. This is different. They have different ages. It doesn't always sync with Social Security.
And is it like based on like loyalty to a specific company, or like?
Yeah.
Okay.
So and that's why they do it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you work for 5 years, your pension benefit is going to be pretty small. Okay. Like there's a pretty big employer here that they give for like the first 12 years, they give you X percentage of your income towards your pension. And then after you've been there for 12 years, they're giving you a greater percentage. After 16 years, they're giving you a greater percentage. So the longer you stay, the more that benefit builds each year of what they're throwing towards your pension.
Okay.
Same idea with the state pension, right? Every year you stay, you get another 2% of your highest earning years added to your pension.
Oh, okay.
I talked to somebody, I ran into my daughter's now 16 years old. She's a junior in high school. And I ran into her first grade teacher at Layton Hospital, oddly enough. She retired from teaching, and she now works at the hospital.
Wow.
She loves it. She's like, it's way less stress.
What?
Right. So first grade teacher goes and works at a hospital, and she's like, this is easy.
Oh, my gosh.
Anyway, so she has, we were just talking about retirement and everything because she knows what I do for a living. And she's making, when she leaves the hospital, she's planning on retiring, she'll actually make more money than when she worked because of the pension from working for so long for the state as a teacher. So anyway, this is rare though. 60% of employers offered pensions back in the 80s, and now it's 4%. So that's not. I mean, really, 96% of all employers do not offer pensions. So this means that it's on us to figure out our own retirement income. But for those who do have a pension, that's what we're talking about today, is how to make that decision.
Yeah.
Because we still run into quite a few people who do it. So the 401k has really changed the employer plan environment, where it used to be more pensions, and now they're saying, well, instead of throwing money at a pension plan for you, we're going to give you matching contributions to a 401k. Now, people might look at that and say, well, this is no good. Like, the employers took care of their employees more back in the day by offering pensions. But you had to stay with one employer for a really long time for that to work. And that's just not the working environment nowadays.
No.
Also, if you might have been making like less than you should have made because the employer, like the employment environment wasn't as competitive, because they didn't have to pay you as much because of that pension out there, and that they knew they had you for decades anyway. So I think there are some benefits to shifting it to more what's called defined contribution plans like 401k versus defined benefit plans like a pension.
Okay.
So that's the premise of what we're talking about today. The first thing you need to do is identify your options. So some pensions will offer a lump sum or a monthly. So meaning, we talked about this offer to pay you a certain dollar amount every month until you die. The employers oftentimes will say, hey, well, what if we'll give you an option to take $1,800 a month, or we'll give you an option and you can take $360,000 right now, and we'll just part ways, and you take the $360,000. We don't have to pay the $1,800 a month, and you do what you want with it. So the question then becomes, well, wait a second, are they giving me a fair trade? Like, how do I analyze that?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about how to analyze that today. That's really the core of what we're talking about. But before we get into that, we still need to understand your options. So there's lump sum and there's monthly, and then there are single life benefits, meaning if you're married, then a single life, like if I had a pension and I died, my wife would not get anything if I had chosen single life, because it's just single on my life. But joint life, if I died, she could get a spousal surviving pension benefit. And that joint life could be something like 50% of what I got, 75, 100. There are different options. Back to the state here in Utah, they have an option that's unique that I've never seen at any other pension, which is you can take a benefit that if the earner dies, this spouse gets 100%. But if the spouse dies, they bump the earner up to the single life benefit, which is kind of cool. Like, I've never seen that dual option going both ways. For those of you who might be with the state, that's option 5. And they have numbers. That one's 5. We see a lot of people do 5 here in Utah. Okay, so we talked about single and joint life payments, and then it's important for you to understand if your pension has a cost of living adjustment, because if it does, that changes the calculation as to how hard it is to replace that benefit. Or, the fair trade we talked about earlier, the lump sum or the monthly. If the monthly goes up with inflation, then you better earn more on your lump sum to make up for what you're giving up over here. So that's something to consider as well. Okay. Then before we get into the math, there are 4 deal breakers. And we run into this all the time, where somebody says, I don't care what you tell me the calculation is on the math on how fair of a trade this is. I am done. I'm taking this option, or I'm taking that option. 2 deal breakers push people towards the lump sum, and 2 of the deal breakers push people towards the monthly. So I'm not saying one or the other, or that all the deal breakers push you one way or the other. But before we even talk about break evens and required rates of return, like, these things matter. And number 1 is inheritance. So some people say, if my spouse and I die, I would hate for my kids to lose all of this, like not have any chance at the inheritance. If you take a monthly, most pensions, I say most, but it's like most all pensions, as soon as you and your spouse die, there's no more payment going to anybody at any time. So if people really struggle with that, like if they thought, gosh, if we got in a car accident, 1 year into retirement and there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that could have been inherited, but the payment's just gone, that's not okay with me.
Yeah.
So that's the deal breaker, the inheritance deal breaker, and that pushes people towards a lump sum. The second deal breaker is the one who's nervous about investing. So the way this sounds is they're like, I'm so scared of investing that even if I take this lump sum, I'm putting that under the mattress and I'm not going to earn anything on it anyway. And they're just so nervous about markets. The benefit of having a really steady monthly payment that they can budget on and know it's going to be there, that's that deal breaker. So that pushes them towards a monthly benefit. Some people, that's just really hard. Third deal breaker is cutting ties with the employer. So not everybody leaves their employer on the best of terms, especially as they get closer to retirement. They might have felt like they got managed out. They might feel like they had age discrimination. They might also feel maybe they didn't feel like they were treated poorly, but they might look at the business and think, I don't think the business is being run well anymore. That's part of the reason I'm leaving. So they're thinking, if the business is not being run well, I don't want them running my retirement income.
Yeah. No.
So they'd
rather just get the...
Exactly. So that's the lump sum. They lean towards the lump sum because they're like, I don't care what the math is. They're not in charge of my retirement. So that's where the lump sum can come into play.
And when are those decisions usually made? Like, is that decision made? Is the pension decision with the lump sum versus the monthly made at the point of retirement? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, typically you can't make it until you retire, or at least until you're submitting your retirement paperwork.
Oh, okay.
And you need to make it usually. Well, different employers are different. Some people will say, well, you can just make that decision when you elect the pension later. That's fine, whenever. And they might let you do it years later. Like, let's say you separated from a company at 50 and you got a new job. Some employers will say, we need you to make an election right now as to what you're going to want for that pension. And some employers will say, don't stress. Like, when you're 65, that's when you need to make a decision.
Okay.
Some of them don't even push you at all to make a decision, but they stop giving you any benefit for waiting it. Like 65 is a pretty common age for pensions where if you wait beyond that, you're not getting any growth on the income, so you might as well take it. So that's a pretty common one. It's important to just look at your pension and figure out what your options are. And more important is about when you're ready to leave, it's really important that you look at what your deadlines are. Because if, let's say that you had a deadline that you had to do something by 120 days after you leave your employer, and if you don't, you get defaulted into one of the two options.
Oof.
That's a once-in-a-lifetime decision. This pension decision is a once-in-a-lifetime decision. It affects your retirement income for the rest of your life. You don't want to forget a deadline and let it pass. Okay, so that's deal breaker number 3, which is you're just wanting to cut ties with your employer. You do not want them in charge of your retirement income. And then deal breaker number 4 is one that very few people identify with, but a lot of people deal with, and it's those who are maybe more of a spendthrift. Like, they struggle to manage a budget. And it's really hard to be that self-aware to say, oh, that's me, So that
is me.
That's So if that's you, it could make sense to do a monthly pension benefit, because sometimes when people see hundreds of thousands of dollars in their bank account, they're like,
all right,
there's no way I'm going to ever run out of money. And it's like, you don't understand how long of a life you have.
Yeah.
Like, how little of that you should spend each year to make that last for 30 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
So if you feel like having a more strict budget, something you can't change and something you have to live on, the monthly may be the way to go. So those are our 4 deal breakers. Let's do a quick recap of them. Inheritance is one, pushes people towards the lump sum. Nervous about investing, that's another, pushes people to the monthly. Cutting ties with the employer, pushes people to the lump sum. And then feeling like budgeting is really hard, pushes people towards the monthly.
I don't have an answer on which I prefer. I don't know.
Well, that's okay. We don't see you don't even have to get to an answer on those 4. That's just if you come with crazy strong opinions about any of those things, that's going to affect your decision.
Yeah.
But let's say you don't have any super strong opinions. Great. Now it's time for us to do the math and actually look at how good of an offer they're giving you. Because we don't have to stress about like, well, even if I run this math, Tony's going to tell me he wants to take the lump sum because he hates his old employer. You know what I mean? So that's why those deal breakers are first, because it may not matter with this math. But let's spend some time here going through the exact mistakes that we see people make on the math and then how to do it the right way. Okay. So let's use this is a real scenario, but fake, names and everything, but a pension that we ran into not too long ago. So we're going to use Rochelle is her name. Pension start at 65 years old and a lump sum of $356,000 and a monthly benefit of $1,800. Okay. So she has the option of picking either of those. And there are two ways people do the math just completely wrong. And bad math example one is they say, okay, I'm getting $356,000 as a lump sum. And what if I take that and I take the monthly benefit out of it, the $1,800 that I was going to get on the monthly, but I just take the lump sum, put it in an account. How many months does that $1,800 per month withdrawal last? And that's 198 months. Divide that by 12. That's 16.5 years. So this person takes this lump sum and says it's going to last 16 and a half years. And they say, can I live longer than that? I might live longer than that. That's not going to work. The problem is you're missing out on the effect of growth. Like that would be if you put that money in cash, earned zero interest, withdrew it, and you literally earned nothing for 16 and a half years. That's not realistic. You're going to have growth on that money. So how do you factor that in? Well, that's by bad math. Example number one happens, and this is the only reason I'm explaining these is because people come to me with these calculations, and they basically say, I think I'm gonna live beyond 16 and a half years. I have to take the monthly. It's like, well, that's not the right math. Bad math number two is they take the monthly benefit of $1,800 a month, they multiply it by 12, they get $21,600 a year, and then they say, okay, that I'm going to think of that like interest. I get $21,600 off of my portfolio, and the portfolio is $356,000, so that's a 6.07% cash flow rate. And then they compare that 6% rate to the market out there, and they'll say things like, well, I can't get a guaranteed 6% anywhere right now, so my pension's better. Well, that's bad math too, because if you had a CD that paid you 6% and you took that cash flow, you could do this same monthly payment, but at the end of the CD, you still have the principal. At the end of this pension, you don't have the principal.
Remind me what CD stands for?
Oh, certificate of deposit.
Okay.
So like you go to a bank and you put money in and they give you interest for a fixed period of time.
Yes.
I just picked that, but whatever. I just picked it because it's a very safe thing.
Yeah. Right.
So the idea is if you had a 6% paying CD, that's better than a 6% cash flow rate on a pension, because at the end of both of the lives of those investments, the pension's gone. The CD still has $356,000, right?
Right.
So there's what you're missing when you do this 6% cash flow rate. I call it a cash flow rate, not an interest rate, is that part of that money is interest, and a big part of that is them giving you your principal back. I mean, they're not counting it like that, but the reality is that's what they call them actuaries, the people that do the math on these types of things.
Yeah.
That they're counting on the fact that like, oh, they're going to live this long. We're kind of giving them their own money back, principal-wise. So that's bad math number two. Calculating a cash flow rate and mistaking it for an interest rate, because some of that's your own money coming back to you.
Right. Okay.
So those are the two ways to do the math wrong, and then there's a way to do this math right. And I think the best way of doing it is by finding out what is your required rate of return. So the required rate of return is how much, so if I take this this lump sum, what is the interest rate I need to be able to take $1,800 out a month and have it go all the way to zero on the day I die, because it's so convenient to know exactly the day you're going to die, right? But like, let's say we can do that.
Everyone wants that.
I don't, actually. I really don't.
No.
I'd start to get too nervous
No.
beforehand. I pass.
And just to pause, you mentioned the word 1,800. Is that a standard amount or is that a hypothetical amount? Okay.
Hypothetical.
Okay.
So this is all based on Rochelle.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And the monthly benefit, the lump sum, all personalized for each individual and their employer and their employment that they've had, their earnings. But this is an example that is quite realistic because we've seen numbers come in like this pretty regularly.
Okay.
She basically needs to figure out, like, if I take this $360,000 and I invest it and I withdraw $1,800 a month, and on the day I die, I use the last dollars, I got the exact same situation as if I took the pension, where I took the monthly benefit and on the day I die, it's gone. So in both scenarios, the day she dies, there's nothing left over. And in both scenarios, she got $1,800 a month. So what we're trying to do is figure out what is the rate of return required to recreate the pension exactly as if she took the monthly benefit. And that depends on how long she lives.
Yeah.
Because if she lives until 90, that's a different required rate of return than if she lives to 82. If she, that's 8 years different that income has to be produced off the portfolio. So the longer she lives, the higher the rate of return she needs to achieve in order to reproduce this $1,800 a month for as long as she's alive. So let's do, I've got we kind of like a waterfall chart here that you can see if you can figure out how to show it. But it's called the required rate of return this one's for Rochelle in particular. At age 90, she would need to earn 3.5%, not 6%. See how if she gets just 3.5% on her lump sum over here and takes out $1,800 a month, the balance will go down, and at age 90, it'll be gone. And if she dies at age 90 over here on the pension, also gone. So it's really only 3.5% that she needs to earn, not 6%. If she lives to 100, she needs to earn 4.9% to be able to produce $1,800 for another 10 years of time. So that's why, but it's not like 7 or 8 or 9 in this case. It's 3.5 versus 4.9. Now it's important to keep in mind the 4.9, you better be, well, let's say the 3.5, you better be pretty sure you can earn that because you have this option over here on the monthly benefit that's built in.
Yeah.
So if you're taking that lump sum, you better be pretty sure that you can beat. So where a lot of people get this wrong is they might say, oh, I average 8% on my investments, no brainer. Maybe, but like if your pension came back at 5, 6, 7% rates of return on the required rate of return here at age 90, and your investment rate of return on your portfolio is 8, 9 or something like that, it's like, well, wait a second. One of these is guaranteed and one of these is variable. I mean, guaranteed is not the best word, but one of these is promised to you. And the other one is who knows what markets do. So you have to weigh in the surety of one of those and versus the other, right? So because of that, you might be willing to take the monthly if it has that high of a required rate of return. Okay, so the important thing is your deal breakers, if you feel like none of those affect you to the point where it just makes the decision for you, now you look at your required rate of return and you carefully decide like, okay, can I beat 3.5%? In this case for her, if she does, if she gets exactly 3.5%, it'll be the same as if she takes the lump sum or the monthly and dies at 90, it's the same either way. Doesn't matter. If she were to get a 6% rate of return on this one, she'd actually get the $1,800 a month from her portfolio, and she'd be left with $343,000 at death. So that's part of the reason people go maybe the lump sum, because if she died right away, her beneficiaries get what's in there. And even if she lives until 90, if she can get a 6% rate of return, her beneficiaries get $343,000.
Yeah, it's not that different.
Right. But over here on the monthly, there's no beneficiary benefit to them ever.
Okay.
To the kids in particular.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's it. Let's just talk about pensions and inflation for a second here too, so to help people think about these two decisions.
And just an additional question I have is like the rate of return. Can you elaborate on that phrase and like what that looks like?
The growth you're getting on your investment that
Okay.
you have. So if you take the pension lump sum, you have to decide what you're going to do with that.
Yeah,
Like you have to put it somewhere.
Don't just let it sit.
Exactly. And in particular, if you're taking a pension lump sum, you're not putting that in your bank account because that will force all of it to be taxed that year. As income, it will be brutal, and most of the time, the monthly benefit's going to be way better than that from a tax standpoint. But you can have the same tax situation if you roll the pension into an IRA, which is an individual retirement account. It keeps its pre-tax status that way. So you don't have to pay taxes on it all when you do that. And then you only have to pay taxes on what you take out of the IRA each year.
Okay.
So if you were to take the $1,800 a month from the portfolio each year, you only pay taxes on that, just like you would only pay taxes on the $1,800 a month on the pension. So I know one employer around here, whenever they get a request to do a lump sum payment and it's not making the payment to an IRA, they pick up the phone and they call their employee. And it's a big employer. And they call their employee and they say, "Do you know what you're doing here? Like, this is not the path."
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, so you roll it to like a 401k, an IRA, some type of account that maintains its pre-tax status, and then you only pay taxes on what you take out as you take it out.
And the lump sum and the monthly whichever path you choose, they begin at the same point.
Yeah.
Like at 65, you said?
Depends on, you can file at different ages depending on the pension.
All right. Okay.
But yeah, if you have a pension available at work and you haven't made a decision by 65, like, it's late. You should be thinking about that because most pensions, like, they stop giving you additional growth after 65, sorry.
And you mentioned that pensions are very rare nowadays. But say if I was working for an employer that was offering a pension, like, that's something that I would be thinking about even, now, right?
Yeah.
And so, depending on this rare employer that I worked with that offered a pension, there's a potential that I could have that pension set up, very small. Say I was there for 10 years, but then say I, moved jobs to a new company and they offer a 401k. Like, how does that relationship kind of, obviously we might be going into that later, but like, how does that relationship kind of?
If you're young, I personally tend to lean towards rolling the pension lump sum into like a 401k or an IRA and trying to get as much growth on it at a higher interest rate by being more growth focused or aggressive with the investments than what the growth would be if you just left the pension in and took it as a monthly benefit later.
Okay.
So you can take old pensions and roll them into like an investment IRA account.
At the point of retirement.
Or right away.
Right away.
Depends on the pension. So this is all, it's hard because the employers make the rules.
Right.
I mean, they have to follow, ERISA is the governing body, ERISA. They have to follow ERISA guidelines and rules as to what they can allow, but many of them are actually really happy to clean their books. If they've got an employee who only worked for a few years, has a $20,000 lump sum or $80 a month pension forever at 65, and this employee is 32 years old, in many cases, they're really happy to say, like, could you take your lump sum and go? Because this is we're paying employees to manage these little things here.
For another 60 years potentially.
Exactly. So in many cases, they want you to do that, especially when you've had shorter stints with different employers. And they oftentimes will make you offers. This is why I think the math is so important. Every once in a while, we'll see an employee come in with a letter that says, "Hey, my employer is offering a one-time lump sum buyout as like a special offer." And it's like, well, let's take a step back and think about that for a second.
Yeah.
If they want you off the books, maybe they're making an offer that's not that competitive for you. Let's look at it carefully and see the required rate of return. Like if they're making you an offer that requires you to take the money and earn 8 or 9% on it, I wouldn't necessarily think that's a great deal. Let's pause for a second and maybe keep the pension.
And I feel like it has become a bigger trend nowadays that people spend less time with an employer than in previous decades.
Absolutely. Okay.
Which
is why I think this is a conversation more for those who are at the door deciding between the pension lump sum and monthly. For everybody else, we need to be talking about what are the types of savings accounts and vehicles that are going to put you in the best position to be ready for retirement through your own efforts, not your employer putting a pension together for you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. Something that affects people's decision here a little bit is the inflation factor. So if you have a pension of if Rochelle has her $1,800 pension per month, and over 20 years, if she experiences 4% inflation, that's like having $795 in the future. Do you know what I mean? Like what you can buy today for $1,800 in the future with 4% inflation, that $1,800 will feel to us like about $800. So that's a big cut in pay over time if you do not have a cost of living adjustment, which this particular person did not. So it's a flat pension. Some people will say, gosh, I really want a better chance of keeping up with inflation. Then that pushes them towards the lump sum. It's not a deal breaker because that's part of the math. That's actually part of the math as to how you can manage it. And if you can beat the required rate of return, you're going to keep up with inflation better.
Makes sense.
Okay, so in summary, let's do just a quick process and end the episode here. You have 4 deal breakers, and then you need to be doing the math the right way. And your 4 deal breakers have to do with inheritance, have to do with nervous about investing, and then your cutting ties with employers, and then managing your budget. If any of those impact you in a big way, you may make your decision on your pension lump sum or monthly and be done. Now, if none of them really affect you that much, and you just really want to analyze the actual math behind this thing and how good of an offer is your lump sum, that's when you need to do a required rate of return, not just summing up the payments and figuring out what the cash flow return is, and not just dividing the lump sum by the payments and figuring out how long that money lasts. In both cases, you're missing either the rate of return on the investment or you're forgetting that they're actually paying you your principal back. So those are the bad math examples. You do your required rate of return, and that will tell you what the interest rate is that you need to earn in order to beat your pension. And then at that point, you're making that decision. And the nice part about it is you don't ever have to make it again. And I hope that people can make the decision confidently and not have regret, be able to move forward and be like, I did it. So this is, if you have a pension, you have Social Security, you layer that on, and then in the future we'll talk about how to do your withdrawals on top of that.
Great.
There are some tools and resources available here that Capita would be happy to provide and help. And main thing would be you can chat with our advisors and give them those 3 numbers. When are you taking your pension? What's the lump sum? And what's the monthly? We can quickly give you your rate of return, your required rate of return, and help you out with that stuff as well.
Fabulous.
So as you work through this pension decision, this framework of your deal breakers and then doing the required rate of return correctly should give you the confidence so that you can make this decision, since it is a once-in-a-lifetime decision. It should give you the confidence to be able to make that decision and have no regrets and no fear about, oh my gosh, did I make the right decision? Did I go the right way? And this is not a everybody should do one or the other. Very personalized and very unique to your situation. So we really do appreciate you guys joining us on our Guided Path series on this YouTube channel. We're going to give you a ton of content, ton of information to help you layer your retirement income in this first season. This in particular is pension analysis. It came after Social Security, and it comes before how you structure your withdrawals from your portfolio. If you want to be smart with your money, subscribe. We will help you through the whole path.
And for more information about Capita Financial Network, you can find a link and a bunch of disclosures in the section below. Thanks for watching.